Alrighty, Roo. Well, that didn't take long because there's only a few of us here, so that's great. More time for the panel. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jane, who's going to be facilitating the panel. And we will introduce Angie, who's here with us from CHOA, Alicia, who's here with us from the Sheriff's Office, and Dr. Oliver, who is here for the school system and as a parent. There you go.
So I know this is a crazy way to do this, but I was having issues with my laptop, so we don't want to pierce your eardrums, so we have to pass this one computer along. So let me just kind of start with introductions of our guests.
Keep going. We'll talk about it in a minute.
Yeah, we'll talk about it in a minute. Okay, so there's funny things happening all over the place. So Angie Boy is from Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. And if you wouldn't mind just telling us a little bit about you and how you fit into this cyberbullying picture.
Okay, I manage the prevention and training side of the Stephanie Blank Center, which is our medical model child advocacy center. So we see kids who need more extensive exams than they can often get in a local CAC, particularly around physical abuse. And my team handles a wide variety of different child abuse and neglect topics. And one of the areas we've been most focused on over the last year, obviously, is online safety and in particular cyberbullying. So we have several different materials that we make available in PDF format for school system employees. We have a lot of elementary and middle school counselors that I have sent our infographic on that they can provide information for parents and students on how to stay safe online. But then we also provide training like this. I did one last week for Lumpkin County and talking about things you can do to stay safe online, but then really focusing on the cyberbullying concept and how it differs from online bullying and how it is similar.
Okay, great. Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to slide the computer over our high technology process here. This is welcome Alicia Hopper. Hello. And she's our school resource officer at the high school.
Correct.
So tell us a little bit about you and your connection to cyberbullying.
Okay.
The topic.
I am Deputy Alicia Hopper, and I work for the White County Sheriff's Office, and I am the school resource officer at the high school. And how I am connected with the cyberbullying is when all other avenues have already been exhausted, then it turns criminal. And then I'm the one that usually will take the charges on the bully or help the parents figure out a solution on how to help their student or how to help their child on what avenue that they need to take. Usually by the time it gets to me, they have already exhausted all other kind of resources, and they're literally at their wits' end. So I'm almost like the last resort, but I'm still able to help. So that's how I fit in.
Oh, wow. We're glad you're here. So Dr. Lindsey Oliver is our school social worker. Will you tell us a little bit about yourself and your connection?
Of course. So I'm the school social worker for the district, and I work with the school counselors and the social emotional learning initiative for the district, and that incorporates prevention services. So the counselors generally take the lead on bully prevention in our schools, K through 12, and I work also with the assistant principals to address any bullying from a mental health perspective. So while the school resource officers look more from a punitive direction, we're looking at the mental health piece. Why might this student be bullied, or who is doing the bullying, and how we can prevent it, and then also some postvention or a reaction to the bullying situation to get folks counseling or mental health services. So that's what I do at work. I also parent a 13-year-old and a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old. And I feel like that gives me much more expertise to talk about online bullying because I'm constantly, diligently keeping up with their online presence and how they interact with the internet. So I was excited when Cheyenne said that I could represent myself as a parent because I'm not often that way in these settings. I'm usually just a school social worker, but I am passionate about keeping kids safe online and really, unfiltered access to the internet. K through 12 is probably not a good idea. So we can talk about that more, but that's my intro.
Yes, thank you. Oh, wow. One thing I want to mention, a little housekeeping thing is we're asking everyone to put their questions in the chat so that we can, kind of keep the discussion going, and then, we'll look at what questions people have. So please feel free to ask questions. Just for now, put them in the chat. So I wonder if we could go around and talk about more specifically examples of cyberbullying the three of you have encountered in your work. So Angie, could you kind of give us an example of cyberbullying?
A lot of what we get reports of are students using online platforms or apps to rate other students, to make negative or disparaging comments about students, to create groups that are exclusionary. That's generally what we see and get reports of when kids end up. And a lot of what we're seeing is kids ending up in our EDs in crisis, generally with suicidal ideation. And it ties back a lot to just feeling harassed online.
Mm-hmm. So for those of us who don't work in your field, what is an ED?
Emergency department.
Okay, thank you. Alicia, how about you? Give us an example.
To follow along with Ms. Boy, she had mentioned for harassment kind of thing. Actually, not too long ago, maybe about a week or so ago, I had a student that would just follow another student or constantly harass that student. And I suggested to the victim, I was like, you need to get a temporary protective order, which is a TPO, go through the legal system, go through the court system. And that student actually went to court this week and the judge granted them a 12-month protective order. So the other student can't even be in the same hall, can't have any kind of contact or anything like that. So by the time like I said, by the time they get to me, they're like, we need legal help by the time. So a lot of harassment, not so much stalking or anything like that, but a lot of harassment, even some like terroristic threats. So there may be some sort of threat going on there, but I've had lots of students come to my office just to say, hey, what can I do about that?
Lindsey, how about you?
I think from a counselor's perspective at the school level, understanding the definition of bullying and what is just hurtful teasing, or some cases misunderstandings in interpersonal relationships and not understanding how people are trying to relate to each other. So helping students, especially youngsters, young kids, what really is bullying. After kids get to middle school and high school, they're really clear on, bullying type behavior. And I've seen things as simple as not getting a like on Instagram or not sharing something on Snapchat, and the student will report that they're being bullied. And then, helping that student understand. And we always consider, though, that that's the perception of the student. So while it may not meet the definition of what bullying is, their perception is that they're being bullied, and then we address it from that direction as well. And also with some, just psychoeducation of this is just maybe mean teasing, and it only happened one time, or just helping the student kind of, and
Oh, I think we froze. Lindsey, we froze. Okay, I think you're back.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm on the wireless at the middle school.
It's technology.
Technology.
No worries. So, and oh, there we go. Okay. This isn't so much a topic, the next question for Ms. Boyd, because you're not in White County, but I wanted to kind of, just the things that you've all said, just this first question out are very illuminating, but we really want people to understand that this is happening in our sweet little community as well. So, Alicia, can you give me an idea of like the scope of cyberbullying in White County, or at least at the high school? Is it a daily incident?
Yes. There, out of all of our students, yes, it's brought to like the school administration, and like Dr. Lindsey, I've got a 13-year-old daughter, and there was an incident where there was some bullying going on through email and all that, and luckily I go through her email, and I even got on there and I told them, I was like, okay guys, this is her mom.
Yeah.
All of this is considered bullying. Y'all are middle schoolers, this, and it needs to stop right now. And I'm going to go to the school so all of your emails can start being monitored. And they're like, oh, we're so sorry. So they knew exactly what they were doing. And but after I started reading the emails, I even told my daughter, I was like, this is absolutely uncalled for. And but that line actually stopped. But yeah, it's like things that we may not even know that's even going on at the high school, because if they're sending it through each other through email, unless the victim actually comes up and tells us, we need to have a good rapport with the students so they will actually trust us enough with that information and tell us, because again, we can't read through everyone's emails, we can't read through everyone's texts, we can't, we don't have the resources to do that, but we just need to build a good rapport with the students so they feel like they can come and actually say, hey, this is happening to me, I need some help, that kind of thing.
What about you, Lindsey? What do you think the scope of this issue is in our community?
Well, I think we should consider the current climate that we're in. So we just left a pandemic schooling environment where we went virtual over a weekend. So we moved our students from attending in person to 24/7, basically needing to access the internet by either Google Classroom or a setting like this, Zoom. And we encouraged them to get online. And then we all anticipated that this would probably be an issue, because if they are engaging online more, then that increases the probability that they'll also engage in online bullying. We do have a system at the school. It's called Go Guardian, and it alerts myself and several other administrators for any hot words or phrases that could be considered bullying, that are self-harming in nature, that are suicidal in nature, that are pornographic in nature, and each person has a tier. So I don't get the first response. I think I'm the second tier. So it'll go to I'm a director, and then if that person doesn't respond in a certain amount of time, it'll come to me. So we do have some filters set up, and it was rather expensive, but absolutely necessary for us to, invest in that kind of technology, because it's only going to become greater. Unfortunately, every kid has one of these that's provided to them by their parent, or who knows, they may be paying for it themselves with their own part-time job. And we can't monitor those like we would be able to a school device. So oftentimes texts between kids, we can ask especially when there's a crime, show me your phone. I'm going to confiscate your phone, give it back to the parent, let the parent look at it. So we do what we can. And I think that's probably the message that I want to give this group, is that we have to remain consistently diligent. And we're never going to be a perfect sieve or filter for our students. So while we remain consistently diligent, we also teach them how to monitor themselves, and what are the repercussions of doing things, and what think about the consequences and things like that. So that's more to that social emotional learning piece, following through with, what's going to happen. And you know what I love too? Natural consequences. So if you send a text and it is inappropriate in nature, that is evidence forever and ever and ever. So I can go to the school resource officer and say, we have this really nice piece of evidence, and a natural consequence to what you've done is that you're going to have to do X, Y, and Z. And often that is a very appropriate response to stop the unwanted behaviors for the student.
Well, thank you for the perfect segue to what I want to ask Angie. So Angie, how do we define cyberbullying? So, we've discussed that, yes, it does exist in White County, but how do you identify it?
Well, the sort of definition is using any sort of electronic means to harass, intimidate, threaten, etc. And so I think Dr. Oliver made a great point about really helping kids understand the difference between what's mean and what's bullying. The problem is, and a lot of that starts very early. You've got to start talking to kids early about positive relationships and how they interact with their peers. And I think the same thing happens when you get to the computer and into the online world, talking to kids about how do you act responsibly online? Because you don't want to send those comments that are hurtful. You don't want to share information that may be embarrassing about somebody, or share a video that's inappropriate just because you have access to it. We talk to teenagers a lot about being that stopping point with cyber type stuff. If you get a text that is inappropriate, or you get a picture sent to you, don't send it to anybody else. You be the person that stands up and stops the issue. And they learn then to begin self-regulating. And we talk all the time when you're thinking about things to share online and sort of identifying when it could be hurtful. Would you send this content to your grandmother?
Yeah, right.
And if the answer is no, then chances are this is inappropriate content. And that's when you start then being able to have that conversation of, is this tipping over into cyberbullying? Are you using your position to be mean to somebody? Do you have that level of popularity at school where you're an influencer, for lack of a better word? And how you respond to something can be hurtful to somebody else. Going beyond that, teasing you because your socks don't match today or whatever, that little innocent stuff. But when you're willingly tagging somebody on Instagram in an inappropriate picture, or you are, making negative comments about on every single post they make, that's when you're beginning to tip over into, this is cyberbullying. This is going beyond mean. This is picking out one particular person to consistently create negative content around.
So let's talk about that one particular person. Is there a type of student who is more prone to be bullied than other people?
I mean, I think your kids that are sort of, they fall on that, I guess, different, for lack of a better word. And I think Dr. Oliver would have a good indication more of what she sees, in the school setting. But I know that the kids that we have encountered who, share with us, they generally are, interested in a more narrow topic. So it may be somebody who's, very into the arts, a guy that's very into the arts, or, isn't the typical, high school athlete that everybody looks up to. Their interests are more narrow. Kids who are perceived as nerdy are generally more at risk, because kids will capitalize on anybody that's different.
What about,
my own daughter is a redhead, and she loves her red hair, but there are kids who pick on her because she has red hair. It's not risen to the level of bullying, but it's different because she's the only redhead in her grade, and so she stands out. But kids capitalize on those differences.
Yeah. What do you think, Lindsay?
Are we addressing the type of kid that's prone to bullying?
Yes.
That's what I thought. I was thinking about this, and we know that 1 in 5 kids have a diagnosable mental health disorder. And that's just United States data. We find that to be accurate here in White County schools. We know that there's a high correlation with bullying that contributes to that alarming rate of students with a mental health disorder. So I would think that we look at students that are already receiving services because they may be especially vulnerable to types of bullying. But what I really want to say is I don't think anybody's immune. I think it's a 100% across the board, and it may be, that really popular kid and they have another person that's bothering them or asking them to send inappropriate pictures, and it's habitual and it's repetitive and it's harassment to them or considered that. And that's, another definition of online bullying. So I don't know if there's a type. I do know that we have some indicators of students that might be vulnerable to it. And then the signs that we can watch for are those that are atypical. So if you have a student that is normally introverted and they're not very talkative, and then all of a sudden they will not leave their room. They are incredibly closed off to other people, and it's maybe just at school, or maybe it's just at church, or maybe it's just with the family. Any change in behavior is a good reason to ask a question and to check in with your student. I don't think there's any bad questions that you can talk with your students about, whether that's sexual in nature. 8 is great. If you are trained in darkness to light, stewards of children training, they recommend that you start talking with children when they're 8 about topics of sex, and then topics with, mental health. That's from the beginning. Tell me how you feel, being able to name your emotions. This is what sad looks like. This is what happy looks like. This is what does this person look like their emotions are? So just helping youngsters to identify emotions are important. And then any changes in behavior that are worrisome. Of course, things like self-harm, saying they're depressed, finding less interest in schoolwork, finding less interest in relationships with with their peers, with family members. And then I will also say, so some of this, if you're raising a 13-year-old, because I am, is just typical adolescent behavior. And they want to stay in their room for a week, and your hands are in the air, and you don't know what's going on. And then the next day, they're your perfect little, student that you love and know. So it's difficult to piece out. So that goes back to remaining consistently diligent in how you're, reaching out to your kid. And I've heard several professionals say that an adolescent at about 13 years old is going to be the most obviously uninterested in your parenting. They're going to be not wanting your input, but that's the most vital time that they need it. So don't listen to your children when they appear aloof and they don't need your input. Continue to be consistent, continue to be vocal, and encourage those opportunities for sharing. So they'll let you know. A great thing to tell kids is a caring adult can always help you with your problems. So if there is something going on with you, you have to tell a caring adult. So that might be, your teacher, it might be your school social worker, it might be your parent, it might be, your neighbor across the street. Tell a caring adult that you're having an issue. And then as, caring adults, we have to respond, of course. And then I like to say you have to let the adults know, and that's what we always tell in the school. If there's a bullying situation, parent, if you're aware of it, let your administrator know ASAP. We are obligated to handle it, and I promise you, we do. We may not have the freedom because of FERPA and HIPAA to let you know exactly how it was determined and what's going to be going on in the future, but we will definitely address the situation.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. I'm kind of going off the track here, but so a parent, let's just make up a scenario. So a parent, which actually we can use the situation that you were talking about. So your daughter came to you and said, look at these emails, right?
Actually, no, she didn't. I proactively go through her emails.
Okay.
because they get sent to my phone also. So I just
Okay.
kind of randomly scroll through and.
So you discovered it.
Oh,
She
yeah.
didn't tell you about
no,
it.
they were still in mid conversation, and I was like, mm-mm.
Okay.
I was like, no, we're putting a stop to this right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but the steps that you took were you reached out to the students because you could reply all because it's all there. Like Lindsay was saying, the
Yeah.
evidence is there. So
Mhm.
you wrote to them, and of course it helps that they know you're a school
Right,
resource
right.
officer. But the parents who are not school resource officers could still
Yeah.
say, I know you're doing this and
Yes.
it's not okay.
Correct. And if you're a parent and you do reply to the students and all that, I'm gonna put this delicately as possibly as I can. Don't add to the drama. Don't jump on the bullying bandwagon kind of thing. If you do read the emails, if you do see the bullying, yeah, you can address it, and then remove yourself from it and tell administration, tell law enforcement, tell someone else, so we also can get involved. But as a parent, yes, I highly recommend tell your child, and you can get on their emails or their texts and say, hey, I am so and so's parent. This is bullying. It needs to stop. And just address it right then in the moment. And then once it's been addressed with the other teenagers, the other students, the other kids, then let the administration know and me know and that kind of thing.
So is that step one? Let me ask Angie, is that step one for the parent to intervene, or do you give the child an opportunity to intervene on their behalf first?
I think it depends on the scenario. I don't think there's a cut and dry answer to that, because it could be something that is rising to the level that could potentially be dangerous. And at that point, I think the parent should step in. And I think it's also going to depend on the child. Does the child have the emotional development to handle this on their own? If you have a child and you can have a conversation with them that says, hey, I read some of these emails. This is concerning to me, and this is why. Do you want to handle it and handle it now? And I'll watch you handle it. Or do you want me to handle it? Because sometimes parents getting involved creates more drama inadvertently, and then can put the child at greater risk for some in-person bullying. But obviously anything that is dangerous or rising to the level that, parent needs to step in. But I think it gets back to the point that Dr. Oliver was talking about earlier, that, you're helping kids learn how to navigate and helping your child and modeling for your child how to be that stop person. I think gives them some autonomy over the situation, but also addresses the situation with your child. And I think it's kind of good to do both and have sort of plans in place for how to handle both. But again, I think having those conversations with your child well ahead of time about what is appropriate online behavior, hopefully you can prevent needing to step in. Because for what we recommend, step one is always having rules before you even give them access. What are those rules? What are the consequences if those rules are broken? And how do we resolve things as they come up? Like this situation with your daughter, she knows you're reading her emails. I'm assuming that's not a secret. So, but she's a teenager. So even knowing that mom was reading her emails, she's still engaged in this behavior. So, that's the thing. Teenagers are dumb. Their brains aren't fully developed.
Right.
That's why they need adults. That's why pediatric emergency rooms are full of injured kids, because they're just not smart. But having those rules and having those boundaries really helps, because research shows that more than 50% of kids report their parents have no rules about their online use, which is scary because unfettered access to the internet is a dangerous, dangerous place for kids. My biggest one is no internet use in your room by yourself, period. You're not taking your computer in there. You're not taking the tablet in there. You're not doing it. There are times I will let my daughter watch a movie on Netflix in the bed. But that's it. And she knows better than to go anywhere other than Netflix, because I'll go check. And she knows that. And she knows that there are consequences if she violates that. And she's almost 8. So her Netflix is also locked down pretty strong too. But have rules. Put those rules in place. Common Sense Media has a great sample family contract on media use, and it's a great way for parents to model good behavior. But then it also just has some tips on how to write sort of a family contract. No phones at the dinner table, no phones in the bedroom, those kinds of things that you can individualize for your family's need, for your child's needs. And it really just sort of helps prevent some situations because you've addressed it ahead of time.
So Lindsey, I want to circle back a little bit to, so let's say that there's a situation, the child says, I want to deal with it. The child dealt with it, didn't work. Parent gets involved, and nothing has changed, and the parent feels the need to go to school staff to deal with the situation. Do you go to the teacher, your child's teacher? Do you go directly to the principal? Do we call school social worker? Who do we start with generally?
Like I say, and probably a principal would say, you're always welcome to call me and I will always assist you because that's the nature of the work that I do. Best practice would be to give the teacher an opportunity to handle it in class, or whoever is the supervising person. So if this is happening in after school, or if it's happening at lunch, you can always call the principal though. Always, 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 because we are going to handle bullying situations. But I think it's best practice to give the teacher an opportunity to either let you know that she knows about it or doesn't know about it, is trying to respond to it, can stop it. And teachers are very sensitive to this. They will listen to you immediately, call you right back. We're charged with it as professionals, and we've received, our own training every year with our compliance director that bullying is not tolerated. So definitely reach out to that teacher. It might be a good practice to reach out to the teacher, copy the principal, give both a call at the same time, but definitely loop in your teacher. And then if you feel like there is a gross negligence on part of the teacher, of course, go to the administrator.
Well, I'm thinking that probably a lot of this, particularly with cyberbullying, doesn't happen like during the school day. It happens after school and in the evening. Is that fair to say?
It is, and I think it was 2019, the state actually established that the school is responsible for bullying 24/7. And the superintendent at the time and I had a conversation about how it's really impossible. How can the school be charged with, supervising children over the weekend and when they have their own personal devices? But nonetheless, we want to know about anything that's happening. So if this is something that's happening at night or on the weekend, in my head, I was thinking of a situation that the bullying is happening at school. So I was my paradigm was the teacher needs to know about it so that she has an opportunity to help. If this is something that's going on, in the neighborhood, absolutely let the administrator know. And I would be safe to say the principal or an assistant principal.
So does that mean, Alicia, that if something is happening with a student and it doesn't happen at school, they can still come to you as SRO?
Yeah, they can still come to me. I'm a certified deputy sheriff, so my jurisdiction is not just at the school. It is actually statewide. So if it's going on at home, you can actually call 911 and have a deputy come to your house because they'll do the exact same thing that I would. And if you do have a deputy come to your house, and if they do a report, they will actually send me a text or send me an email and say, hey, can you follow up on this Monday at school? Or so if something does happen on the weekends and you do end up calling the sheriff's office, they will forward me a copy of the report, and follow up. I'll touch base with the victim and say, hey, what happened this weekend? Hey, what do you want to talk? Do you want to talk about it? What can I do to help? That kind of thing. But yeah, if something does happen on the weekends or even during the summer, the deputies will still call me and say, hey, do you know this kid? Do you that kind of thing.
So, you said you're the end of the line.
Per se,
what does that mean? Like, is that because the parent is so angry and wants blood, or is that because it's dangerous? It's a dangerous situation.
Like, usually, if the parent has already stepped in and they've already talked to their student, they've already contacted the bully's parents, they've already contacted the school, they've already gone through all lines of communication and stopping it, and this kid is just persistent on and on and on, then they're like, we have no idea what else to do other than file charges, or what can we do, that kind of thing. So yeah, whenever the parents are usually like, okay, I am like up to here because we've already gone through all the steps and nothing is working, they'll come to me and I'll say, okay, this is what I can do, and then we'll try that, and then we'll go through a judge, and then finally something will finally click and it'll be resolved. But that's what I mean whenever I say I'm kind of like the final, the end of the rope, but not not literally end of the rope, but when you've already exhausted all your other avenues.
The law is pretty much the top tier of intervention. Yeah. Now, what about if the student, who's being bullied, the child who's being bullied, can't get the situation resolved, and they become more and more depressed, and their mental health is in danger, and they're experiencing severe symptoms. Angie, what should a parent do?
You want to reach out immediately for assistance, getting your child connected to mental health services. So most of the time, school systems are going to know who is best, who can work with parents if they need to self-pay versus insurance. I don't know how your county school system works. And I know we're in the Fulton County system, and we actually have a mental health provider who comes to the school one day a week to see kids who have identified as having a need. And sometimes it's simple as parents are going through divorce, the kid's having trouble handling that. It's that level. You can also always reach out to your child's pediatrician, and ask for a referral. Obviously, if the child is actively suicidal, you want to immediately get to the emergency department, because that child may need some more intensive inpatient therapeutic services. But a lot of times it's just getting connected, and schools, I have found, oftentimes have those resources and know who in the community works with kids, who can work with the families when it comes to paying for services. Utilize those resources. I tell parents that all the time. Reach out to your school.
We have that resource here as well, and we established that 2 years ago. Her name is Francesca Smith, mental health coordinator, crisis interventionist, and similarly, she has established memorandums of understanding with all the counseling agencies in the area, and they can provide school-based services, they can provide telehealth services, or they can provide services in the clinic. And like you said, the payer is often such a determinant in how students can get services. So she knows if you have UHC, this is the quickest way to get a counselor is to use this particular company. If the student's on Medicaid, then the quickest way to get counseling is to use this company. So she's worked out those kinks so that we can really decrease the time it takes to get students to the services that they need. So I'd highly recommend if anyone needs mental health services to reach out to her. Yeah, and I'm happy to be a liaison as well.
I could see Lindsey on the edge of her seat, like,
oh, let me know what to say.
Yeah. So we know about mental health resources. We know about legal resources. Angie, you were talking a little bit about starting at the very beginning with rules for your child and how they can use social media and technology. What are some other resources that we can, whether you're a professional working with a school or families or a parent, what are some great resources? I think you sent us a list, Angie.
I did. And those are the ones we generally recommend just because they're the broadest. Bark is usually the one that we sort of recommend as the go-to because it has the ability to look for keywords, look for conversations. It scans texts, it scans online activity, and has some protective capabilities. So we recommend that. It does cost. I think it's $40 a year or something like that. But it's just that added level of security. There are others like Net Nanny and a couple of other commercial products that were on that list I sent, but Bark is generally the broadest one. But I think the other thing, as for professionals and for parents, is the biggest sort of resource is to educate yourself about the different apps. Know where your kids are going online. Know how they're accessing the internet. I am amazed at the number of parents who have gaming systems in their home and have no idea that gaming system is connected to the internet. And they can be, their child can be conversing with people all over the world. So know what the apps are, know how they're used, know how they're abused. With things like Instagram, follow your child and follow the friends of your child, because kids coming up with fake Instagram accounts is key. But again, going back to the kids aren't always the smartest, they will comment with their fake page on somebody else's page, and then you'll discover, oh, wait, I didn't know about this account, and you go find it. So it's making sure that you're staying up to date. Even if you never post on Instagram, you still have an account because you want to be able to follow your child. Same thing with Snapchat. Basically, if your child is using an app, you need to have that app as well and know how it's used and be connected to your child via that app. So it's thinking about those physical safety things that you can do along with the rules and the responsibilities for using the online, whether it's apps or websites or whatever.
What advice do you have for, we work with a lot of families who have grandparents who are raising kids, and they are not interested and don't feel like technology is their purview at all. So what advice could we give to those families?
I think some of it is, again, that being familiar. I just last week with Lumpkin County, or the week before, whenever it was, we had a grandmother who actually discovered some inappropriate content via an inappropriate app, and ended up in contact with ICAC and the FBI because of what she found.
Wow.
So I think, even if it's as simple as offering some of these like social media for dummies kind of thing, where they at least can be aware of where the dangers are, even if they're not going to use them all the time, even if they're not going to, have them on their phone, they at least know what they are and know what they need to be looking at on their grandchild's phone or on the tablet, and really be aware of it, even if they're not going to use it. Really having that sort of 101 for safety. And those are the families that I would highly recommend that they utilize something like Bark or Net Nanny or one of those that's going to alert them to problems.
If anybody we do have like some websites and things. If anybody wants a list, if you want to put your email in the chat, we can send that out to you, by the way. So I did I'm going to check and see. I saw one question. Robin had asked, does this only apply to students using school computers and school emails? So I think we were talking about bullying that happens at school. I guess that's what the question is.
It does not. It means any device.
Yeah.
Okay.
It doesn't matter who owns it or who is using it.
Okay. That's the only question that's here, and I see people are putting their email addresses in there so we can send this list out. So how are we on time?
We have 5 minutes.
We have 5 minutes left. So I guess let's do top 3 things that you do for your kids. Why don't I start with our lovely resource officer?
Just to keep them from being bullied, or what do you-
Yes, yeah, to keep them from being bullied.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I monitor her texts, I monitor her emails, and I know who her friends are and who her friends' parents are. So those are the top 3 things that I do
Yeah.
to keep her from being bullied and from her being a bully.
Yeah. You know, that works whether it's cyber or in person, right?
Yes.
That's just good
Yes.
parenting. Lindsay, what are your top 3?
My number one, well, I don't know if this is in order of importance, but it's definitely 3 important things is to diligently monitor. You have to know what devices in your home are connected to the internet. Alexa can call anybody that you want Alexa to call. Your TV is often smart, and with just a few clicks can access internet sites that you may not be aware of. We have Google devices in my home, and they're constantly listening to us. So just be aware of what access points your student has, and then you have to monitor it. Number 2, provide limits. Don't expect a 14-year-old to know how to set their own limits. They are not physically or psychologically capable of creating limits. Just like Angie said, they are not smart most of the time. So when your 13-year-old says, "Mama, just 30 more minutes on the Xbox," you have to physically walk into the living room and say, "Okay, your 30 minutes is up." And then you can have a boundary in place if you want to help them self-monitor by saying, if you don't stop yourself in 30 minutes, then it's going to be taken away. But just don't expect for them to be good device monitors on their own, because they just can't do it. So I see folks all the time, "Oh, I trust my kid. She would never do that." And that is never the right answer. If they're in our public schools through 12th grade, no trust. Until they're paying for that cell phone bill all by themselves and they can take responsibility for it, you've got ownership on that device. And then thirdly, use this device as a modification tool, a behavior modification tool. My kids have access to the internet, but we have a very strict and specific expectation, and they are very clear on those. The devices can only be used on these certain days, during these certain hours, and in these certain rooms in our home. If it leaves our house, I have to be aware of it, and you have to have been given prior permission. It's written in a Google document. Both children have signed it, and I used a template that I got from a website similar to what Angie suggested, and I created it for our family, and everybody's aware of it. We've had to go back at sometimes and change it to, except on school holidays. Nobody wants to have limits when we're out for spring break. So I get that, and they're getting older, but I've got a hard line on internet devices in bedrooms, and they cannot have them there because, they're typically adolescent developing people, and there's too much temptation.
Do you monitor?
What I love about using the device as a behavioral tool is that you give it and then you can take it away, and then you give it back. You reward the behavior, and then you take it away when they break or, their consequence for not following the rules. And then your sweet, lovely child will return to you, and you'll begrudge the day that you have to hand it back, but hand it back because it's a great tool for them to learn how to manage it themselves. Because that's ultimately what we want, is when they're 18 and they head off to college, that you can give them their devices and they're not going to get in trouble.
Right.
And they're going to be able to self-monitor and make good decisions based on, how you've helped them learn to use their devices.
Thank you. That's great. Angie, we have like 2 minutes left. So your top three.
I mean, most of mine are very similar to what have already been said. Having those boundaries and limits about how the device is going to be used. But I also really emphasize having constant communication with my daughter about what's going on in her life, to the point that I sometimes get one-word answers. But I want to know, like, what excited you about school today? What bothered you about school today? What are you feeling? And now that she's older and able to write a little more, I'm actually going to institute a notebook method with her, where I can write something to her and leave it on her bed. And if she has something she needs to tell me but doesn't want to tell me, she can write it in the notebook and leave it on my bed. And then we can have a conversation about it, because that open communication is key. I've always been that way with her. Ever since she was little, like I've emphasized to her that she can tell me anything. Don't worry about whether you think it's going to hurt my feelings. I want you to feel comfortable saying what you need to say. Now we talk about saying it politely, but still, she's a kid. But I want her to know that. Like, I want her to know that she can come to me. But if she can't come to me, I want her to know that there are safe adults that she can go to. Whether that's teacher, school counselor, somebody at church. She has other adults in her life that are going to echo what I tell her, but can be that safe person.
That's great. This has been so good, you guys. Thank you so much. I'm going to slide the laptop over to our fearless leader here.
Hey, it was really wonderful. Thank you guys so much for all of your time and for all of your expertise. We really appreciate it. I did record this, and so hoping I'm going to be able to trim it up a little bit and then post it, if that's okay with everyone, on our social media sites. So for those who weren't able to attend, can still get the great information that was shared today. And I see...
That's fine.
Great, thank you. I see email addresses, and so I will make sure to send that as well. Is there anything else just before we leave each other for the weekend?
I'm happy to be a personal consult for anyone. If you need to just talk privately about specific situations, I'm happy to help in that capacity.
Thanks, Lindsay. All right, well, if there's nobody else, thank you guys so much for coming, and we really appreciate your time.
Sure. Thank you for having me.
Bye.